Okay, so different setting here. I'm in Dumfries and Galloway for Christmas, and I'll probably stay here over the New Year period. I'm not 100% sure yet. So, just in case you're wondering, the different setting. In my last video, spoke about injustice and how strongly I feel about the issues around that. Um, I want to talk a little bit more about this report. The little girl in London found charity Christmas card that was appealing for help, purporting to be from foreign prisoners forced to work in a Chinese factory. Go read out the whole report from the Eye, or rather the latest development in this, and respond to it. It's not very long, so bear with me. Chinese factory denies using forced labour. This is from Jane Clinton in the Eye newspaper. Christmas Eve. A factory in China accused of using forced labour to make Tesco charity Christmas cards has denied the claims. Card supplier Zhejiang Yongguang Printing told China's Global Times, come back to that, significant, it had never done such a thing. Staff at the card supplier said they only became aware of the allegations when some foreign media contacted us. The spokesman added, we have never done such a thing. Why did they include our company's name? The Chinese Foreign Ministry said the allegation was a farce. The message, allegedly written by prisoners on one of the cards, said that they were forced to work against their will. It was discovered by Florence Widdicombe Six from London when she was writing cards to her school friends. In one of them, the message in block capitals read, we are foreign prisoners in Shanghai Qingpu Prison, China, forced to work against our will. Please help us and notify human rights organisations. It also asked whoever read the message to contact BBC journalist Peter Humphrey. He had been imprisoned at Chengpu on the outskirts of Shanghai on what he described as bogus charges. The Widdicombe family duly contacted Mr. Humphrey. He said he then had contacted ex-prisoners who confirmed inmates had been forced to work. Mr. Humphrey then broke the story in the Sunday Times at the weekend. Tesco halted production at the factory over the message. A spokesman said it had launched an investigation at the factory on Friday. He said that Tesco is to have further meetings with representatives from both the factory and the supplier, adding that it has not placed any orders from the site since October. Right, firstly, this little girl, Florence Widdicombe, she really deserves credit because if she hadn't went to her father, and her father deserves credit too for acting on this. They could easily have dismissed it as a prank. They could easily have just thrown it out. But they contacted Peter Humphrey, as the message indicated. Peter Humphrey, of course, is known as a man who spent time in a Chinese prison and went through an ordeal of forced confession. And on top of that, the authorities lied to him. They told him that his wife already knew about a deceased relative and she didn't. So they had this emotional situation to deal with immediately before his trial. CGTN, which is the mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party, aired his forced confession. Um, and it's likely they've done the same thing with Simon Cheng in the Hong Kong situation. Um, when it comes to the Chinese government, when it comes to Chinese factories and so on that are associated with the Chinese power system, I will never ever believe a word they say because I think they are compulsive professional liars. Um, this is not the first time that such messages have been found inside products that have been brought into the West. And the thing about China, and this is what I observed, it's a communist country, and you get the single party totalitarianism of that and all the things you'd associate with a single party system. But there is also kind of the worst aspects of capitalism. And that's what I think we see with this sort of thing in China. The only thing that matters to these big companies and so on is profit. Now, you can make a case that there's exploitation goes on in the West as well. Amazon, for example, has been in hot water over some of the appalling things that have been happening in their sites in Britain. So I'm not for a second going to claim that we do not ourselves have problems. But let me just say a few things regarding the details in this report. Global Times. Global Times is nothing but a jingoistic arrogant mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party, they will never, ever, ever admit that there's anything wrong in China when it comes from an outside source. Now, the message doesn't specify who the foreign prisoners are, for example, which nationalities. But put it this way, if we assume that it's a hoax, if we assume it's fake, the obvious question is what purpose? To defame China, to try and make China look bad? Okay. For what purpose? For what purpose? How would this put the British Foreign Office in an advantageous position? Because these sort of things, um, they know Beijing robustly denies them, and they know that Beijing gets defensive about them. So why would they? Let's just play from a purely human, practical point of view here. Why would British diplomats, why would the British Foreign Office make their job more difficult? Because we have to communicate with the Chinese, we have to have some level of cooperation. I think it should be greatly curtailed at this point, or at least re examined. But why would they do that? Does that make sense? To make up false charges just for the sake of it. That's what Global Times is alleging. These odious communist mouthpieces have no shame. They are liars. They are absolute liars. I mean, Global Times is an affront to journalism. Um, and for me, this just further reiterates why we really need to show no tolerance to the likes of Xi Jinping operating in this country. I feel very strongly about it because in China, only one opinion is allowed, and it's pretty much our version is correct, and no one else is allowed an opinion. So they'll simply deny the claims. They're not even going to bother investigating them. So they're not going to say, okay, these claims have been raised with us. We'll see what we could do. They're just point blank denying them, which indicates one of two things: either they simply don't care, or they cannot be bothered. Well, yeah, they cannot be bothered to actually look. I mean, I don't know how big this factory is, but if it's a big facility, how can they be 100% sure that there isn't corruption going on within their system? It may even be that the people at the very top don't know about it, and it could be like corrupt local officials or something, in which case they have a responsibility to investigate. But frankly, with China, I'm not even going to say corruption, I'm going to say it's just the system. It's the only thing communists care about is profit. And it sounds ironic, right? But the modern Chinese Communist Party is actually very materialistic in that sense. They think just throw money at the problem and that'll be it. I know it doesn't say that in the report, but I mean that's how they thought they could placate the Hong Kong situation. They just don't get it. They just don't get the concept of human liberty, and it really sickens me. Um, this is just yet another glaring reminder. I know who I believe. And yes, there would need to be some more of an authentication. I think Tesla has done the right thing, though. I mean, they have a choice. They either take the word of this factory, and in China, every big business is directly connected to the government. That's the way the system is. So they're basically taking the word of the Chinese Communist Party, which, in my opinion, is just they can't be trusted. Um, I think Tesco's done the right thing. They rightly, understandably, don't want to be associated with exploitation on their in their chain. More than exploitation, basically servitude. I mean, this is appalling. So well done to the family for getting involved, and big respect to Peter Humphreys. Despite all the things he has personally been through, maybe because of them, because he knows what the system is, he hasn't given up. So I think our government has a responsibility. I think every British institution, as a matter of fact, not just our government, but media institutions, Ofcom, anyone in a position of power needs to understand the Chinese regime for what it is. And you may say, oh, but this is a factory, what's this got to do with the Chinese government? What you need to understand is in China, every power dynamic is connected to the Chinese Communist Party. There's no disconnect. The only way someone could go far in China is by having close links to the communist regime. It's the only way, because that is how the system is constructed. There is no true independence. Um, for entrepreneurs or businesses or journalists or pretty much anyone else. The Communist Party has an iron grip on pretty much everything in that country. And given that they are professional liars, they've been lying for 70 years, um, I just don't believe them. And the thing is, um, you'll get the usual 50 Cent brigade, Chinese nationalists who want to make excuses. They want to say, oh, to bias Western media, or it's a Western invention, it's a CIA plot. They come out with the same excuses that the Islamists do. But in the end of the day, this is a regime that is built on lies. It's a regime that's very survival depends on lies. Lies. In China, lies are considered more important than any other value because for them, I think they do it so much they maybe don't even know they are lying. I think that it's so built into their system. Like there is nothing worse than losing face in front of foreigners. Hence, this arrogant thing comes in. Lie about it. Well, just lie. That's the official line when it comes to foreign critique. Lie. Just like what they're doing in Xinjiang, and it disgusts me to the core. Um, and as I always say with these things, I'm not anti-China at all. I've nothing against the people. I've nothing against the culture. But stuff like this stinks. Absolutely stinks. And yeah, global times, it's an odious rag. So I don't know what can be done with this, but that is the context that people need to understand.